difference starts now.
A 49-year-old father is murdered in a shocking crime. Police say he was tied to a truck and dragged until he died in a hate crime killing.
It could have been any black man, any that was walking that street at that night. He was not picked because of their knowing him. He was picked because he was a black man in this place.
Bird's body was found on this remote road Sunday morning, just outside of Jasper. Today, FBI and sheriff's deputies continue to comb it, looking for clues. Some of the residents in this neighborhood tell us...
I understand that there were so many circles that they have outlined on this road showing they found different body parts. That in itself is a nightmare. I also came to find out later that they had spray painted my brother's face with black paint. That was the supreme insult. To me, that sends the message that in case you didn't know that we did it because he's a black man, we're giving you another message. We're spray painting his face black to let you know that we're doing it because he was a black man.
4 generations of the Byrd family were born and raised in Jasper, Texas. James was the last to sit in a racially segregated classroom. He had some problems in his own life, including a criminal record. But his children attended mixed schools, and 2 of them served in the U.S. military. They last saw their father alive as he set off to walk home after a family party. The exact details of the murder will emerge in the trial, but according to affidavits filed in court by the police, the journey to his death began near Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard. It is alleged that James Byrd was picked up by 3 white men. These suspects drove him to a wooded area on the outskirts of town, where they brutally beat him. Then they chained his ankles to the back of their truck and began to drag him down the road. Despite the fact that the head and the right arm were torn from the body, the dragging continued. Daylight revealed a trail stretching for approximately 2 miles on a road scattered with blood and flesh.
I wasn't allowed to say goodbye to my father because of the nature of his death. He was totally dismembered. There was nothing there except for flesh and bones, and his head was severed from his body, and the coroner thought it was unbearable for the family. You know, you don't want to have to remember your parent like that.
The remains of James Byrd's body were unchained by the roadside near a cemetery and a church in a predominantly black neighborhood.
He's accused of a crime that shocked the world and divided a town. Now John King wears a bulletproof vest as he goes to court in the first trial involving a hate crime killing.
9-year-old James Byrd Jr., a black man, was beaten, then chained by his ankles and dragged behind a pickup truck for 3 miles down this country road until his body was torn apart. Prosecutors say Byrd was murdered because of the color of his skin. A few days later, King, along with Russell Brewer and Sean Allen Berry, all white men, were charged with Byrd's gruesome murder.
Prosecutors pulled out a 24.5-foot-long chain they say was used to drag James Byrd Jr. to his death. Overall, it was a very eerie moment as that chain clanged and echoed through the courtroom. It is the chain authorities say was used to tie up and murder James Byrd Jr. It is a gut-wrenching display for family members seated in court.
It was really tough, yes. I did everything I can just to sit there, really.
John William King appeared emotionless in court as the chain was displayed. Tommy Falk, a man who has known King for 15 years, testified that unknown to him, the chain was buried in the woods behind his home. A second suspect, still awaiting trial, Sean Berry, led authorities to the chain the day after Byrd was murdered.
Testimony in the dragging death trial today, testimony the prosecution says it needs in order to call for the death penalty. Item, a pathologist says James Byrd Jr. was alive as he was chained behind a pickup truck and then dragged to his death last year.
Now, picking a jury should take 2 to 3 weeks, since each juror can be questioned one at a time by attorneys. The trials for the 2 other men accused of Byrd's murder have not yet been scheduled. Stay with News 2 Houston for continuing coverage of the hate crime killing trial in the coming weeks.
On trial for the murder of a man just because he was black. Graphic evidence is already on display in the first day of the dragging death trial. That trial puts the small town in the spotlight once again. The case got underway this morning in Jasper. That's where News 2 Houston's Mary Benton is live now with the story. Mary?
Well, the first day of the trial, Linda, has ended for the day, and a packed courtroom along with the jury, which includes one African-American, heard some very graphic testimony. Tensions are already high after the first full day of testimony. The jury heard disturbing details about the dragging death of James Byrd, and they saw grisly pictures of his dismembered body.
Well, Mike and Anna, today was very detailed and very gruesome. The DA here describing how the blood from the victim was found on the suspect's shoes. Also today, some very graphic photos were shown to the jury.
But a prison tattoo artist did, saying King's satanic and racist tattoos were only meant to protect him in prison. But another witness testified that King wrote the words "white pride" on his jail walls and secretly wrote a letter to one of his co-defendants bragging that because of Byrd's murder, they will go down in history.
An emotional turmoil. You know you needed to be there, but it's very hard to hear those details and to see the clothing that he was wearing. Some of the things we didn't know, and that was especially hard to deal with.
It's like reliving that experience all over again, just like it just happened.
James Byrd Jr. was a sweet soul who loved to play the piano and sing, according to family members. Today, they released this home video showing him the way they remember him.
Mr. King, do you have any comments?
John William King is one of 3 men accused in the dragging death of James Byrd Jr. The father of the accused was also present in court today. Also today, prosecutors offered more insight into the personality of the accused by presenting these letters allegedly written by King. The racist N-word appears a number of times. Written to a then 15-year-old, the letters are signed by King. One saying blacks and whites who date should be hanged.
He's writing her racist letters. He has a lot of racist language thrown in, and he seems to always attach violence to his races, hanging both of them if they're out together.
Burns testified that the victim's body was so badly battered that bone and muscle were visible. Parts of his body were literally shredded.
Because I just couldn't imagine that road being that long. You know, I thought maybe they rewind it and restart it. And it was just like, and I would just imagine being dragged down the road for that length of time.
So it seemed like it just went on and on?
It seemed like it never was going to end. And then you can imagine the pain as they expressed the other day that all this time he was going through pain. We knew that he was conscious, alive, but we didn't know all the details, like description of his torso and his head and neck. We didn't know all the graphic details, and that was very hard to hear.
Now, King's attorneys did not make an opening statement today. They admit they believe he'll be found guilty of capital murder. So they say they prefer to focus on saving his life instead of him getting the death penalty. We're live in Jasper. I'm Mary Benton.
Made any comments to us one way or another as to how it's going. He doesn't like seeing all his writings, but he's a prolific writer. He likes to write and expound his thoughts.
As expected, security here is extremely tight. Uniformed officers arriving by the busload, then forming a safety barrier outside the courthouse. But for the family of James Byrd, it's what develops inside the courtroom that matters most.
Justice, quick, swiftly, carried out.
By horses and cameras and crowds, finally there came an end.
I hereby sentence you to death by lethal injection. Sheriff, you may take him to the Texas Department of Criminal Justice to await an execution date.
There were no tears in the courtroom for the killer, but the family of James Byrd wept with relief. It had already been a day of high drama, from King's arrival at the courthouse to the passionate closing arguments.